we're 51 hours away from the selection show coming up on Sunday night for the Orange Women in minus 15 minutes. So we're getting close to finding out where the Orange will be seated, where they'll be shipped off to, who they'll be playing, when they'll be playing. Coming up in the women's basketball NCAA tournament, they'll be playing either a week from today or a week from tomorrow in the first round. They'll be 2 weeks removed from their most recent game when they are next on the court. But right now, let's go back to our guest line and bring on ESPN women's basketball bracketologist. He is Charlie Creme, and busiest time of the year. Charlie, what's it like for you these days, or is it almost wrapped up for you because all the major conference stuff was last week?
Well, there's a little bit of both to that, Brian. Last week was more chaotic, things kind of changing with games one at a time. But it's not. Well, I'm not freed up this week by any means. Some of the smaller leagues that are impacting maybe the bubble. And sometimes when you've got a week to kind of sit on even the top seeds, you start to question yourself because really what I'm attempting to do is to guess what the 12-person committee is going to do. If it was just up to me, then it would be easy. I'd make my decisions and I would stick to them. But when you are trying to read the tea leaves to some degree, then you start to question yourself, would they really do this? Would they really do that? Am I on the right track here? So sometimes it's an excruciating week this week because all you have to do is look at yourself in the mirror with at least with the top seeds and a lot of the top 16 stuff that's so important in the women's game with hosting first and second round games. Sometimes it's just too much too much time spent alone and your own thoughts. Like I don't want to be alone with my own thoughts. Sometimes they get scary.
Yeah, you'll get the answer to the test on Sunday, which is the good part coming up here. Nothing easier. Obviously, the number one overall seed has been set in stone here for a while with South Carolina, though they had a wild last weekend. We can get into the top seeds here in a second. But give me your thoughts on the Cuse right now, Charlie. When last we talked about a month ago, they were making a push for a 4 seed. Obviously, that fizzled out a little bit here in the last few weeks. A 5, a 6. I know you got them as a 5 right now. What is the range we should be looking at for Syracuse on Sunday?
That's the range. They're the last 5 seed on my list, so number 20 overall. And when they lost to Florida State, I had moved them to a 6. So essentially 21 overall, so they were the best 6 seed. But then Baylor lost in the early portions of the Big 12 tournament, the quarterfinals, to Iowa State. So I flip-flopped them again. That's such is the nature of championship week and the moving parts when those games are going on. So worst case scenario, I think Syracuse is a 6, and I think 5 is probably best case scenario. I think the loss to Florida State was pretty devastating. I think they still had a shot to make a run at a hosting position, but you can't lose in your first game in your conference tournament and lose in that way and still expect to hang in there. And there's just too many other teams doing things better than that. And the last thing that the committee gets to see you do to be able to sustain or get pushed up to a top 16 spot.
Yeah, it wasn't just a loss. It was a grim-looking loss in that game on Friday. I mean, FSU played really well, but Syracuse got knocked around a bit in that game. I thought, about 3 weeks ago, you looked at Cuse, Louisville, and Notre Dame. I'm like, I don't know how it's going to work out, but the ACC is going to get another team hosting it. It looks like that's Notre Dame, right? They have gone on the warpath here the last few weeks and really rocketed up the rankings.
Yeah, in fact, Notre Dame to me right now is I'm not probably, I'm not splitting the atom here when I say this. They're the best team in the ACC right now. They just won the tournament. They did it, other than the championship game, they did it pretty decisively. It helps the cause when Virginia Tech suffers an injury like Liz Kitley going down and she can't play. But that game was out of hand very early. They were really solid in the second half against Louisville. They were great when they needed to be. It wasn't a great game necessarily against NC State, but they were great when they had to be. And that was more of a game of attrition, but hey, that goes a long way too. Survive and advance, and in that case, they survived right into an ACC tournament championship. So I fully expect that they will be the top ACC team on the board. I think they fall on the same seed line though as NC State, but I would certainly have Notre Dame placed ahead of the Wolfpack. But Wolfpack definitely number 2, and then it's the Kitley injury. Then becomes the big question mark for the committee. Virginia Tech's probably not going to say whether she's going to be able to play in the NCAA tournament or not. Mm-hmm. But I think just the injury and the way they played without her is going to hurt Virginia Tech's seed. I've been saying I don't think it's going to hurt them enough that they fall out of the top 16. But if there is any specific news as to Kitley's status, and it's not good news, then I think it's possible that the committee would move Virginia Tech outside the top 16. I just don't think we're going to get any news. I think Notre Dame sort of set the bar for how you deal with a late season injury and how you report it publicly. You're supposed to tell the committee or the NCAA what your status your player is. That's what you're supposed to do. But Notre Dame didn't do that last year, even though it was obviously now in hindsight, we know Olivia Miles didn't play this entire season. Right. So she certainly was not going to play in last year's tournament. And Notre Dame didn't get their seed hurt by keeping everything quiet. I have a feeling Virginia Tech will do the same, and they haven't said anything yet. It's already Friday. As you did the math, Brian, we're already 51 hours in or close to the selection show. So I don't think we're going to get any new news. But I think unless there's been something privately said and passed along to the NCAA, I think the idea of Kitley as being a possibility to play come Friday or Saturday will still be put out there, and Virginia Tech's seed will not be hurt as much as it would be if she happened to be completely sidelined. Yeah. Which I will say is someone who has no medical degree and does not check her knee out personally. Based on what I've seen, I really don't think she's going to play.
Based on, I'm a doctor I play a doctor on TV, Charlie, but based on what I'm seeing, I'd be surprised if her ACL is in the best of shape right now, unfortunately for Liz. And hey, we saw Syracuse on the men's side going back to 2010, like Arinze Anawaku got hurt in that ACC tournament. The Orange were a 1 seed. They kept that. Oh, he might play, he might not play. He literally didn't play basketball for another year after that, and they still ended up with a 1 seed. There's just no benefit, right, in putting this information forth at this point.
We've learned, and there's all these historical precedents. There's just no point to doing it. I guess it doesn't seem ethical. It doesn't seem like the right upstanding thing to do. But you got to take care of your own, and the best way to do that is to just kind of keep quiet, or just kick it down the road as long as you can. And I have a feeling that's what will happen. I just from the other side of the fence of this, you feel so badly for Kitley, for Virginia Tech. She's a great player. By all accounts, she's a great kid. That's a fun team to watch. The fun story when she's out there. The run last year was very enjoyable for all of us who were really into the game. So to not see her on the court is, not to be too sophisticated with my words, I'm just going to say it's a huge bummer.
Yeah. No, she's had some great tournament games too. She was really fun to play. That team was really fun to watch on the run last year, and it's too bad they're likely not going to get to do that again legitimately this year. As Charlie Creme is with us, ESPN women's college basketball bracketologist. Back to the Syracuse idea here, Charlie. You said you've got them there right on the fence with a 5 and a 6, which leads me into this question: is UConn on the fence with a 2 and a 3, or are they a 3? Because Charlie, I've seen this movie before, and it feels like if Syracuse is on the fence with a bus trip to Stores, that they often end up on the bus trip to Stores. We went through this in 2017 where, Syracuse, I think you had them as a 6, and they ended up as an 8 and got shipped out there. Like I've seen the horror film before, Charlie, and I just got a feeling we're going to relive this again.
Well, it's certainly possible. I'm not. If Syracuse is a 6, and that's, as I said, that's only a difference of opinion by one spot on the S curve, the 20 or 21. That's not really a big deal when you're having these kind of conversations. I think UConn is definitely going to be a 3. They're the best 3, but I don't see them penetrating that 2 line with teams right ahead of them like LSU and Ohio State, who have done just a little bit more or are UConn's a double champion. Ohio State won the Big Ten regular season championship. But I think if you're watching these teams play, you have to look at what UConn did in the non-conference, which they scheduled great. They always do. They lost most of those games this year, which is unusual for UConn. So is it a possibility that Syracuse ends up in stores playing UConn? It is. I hate to be the bearer of bad news if that's not what anybody wants, but it's also, there's a lot of other options out there too. I guess it comes down to, as a fan, what do you root for? Would you rather have them go to stores and maybe have the opportunity to go to the game, or would you be happy with them shipped out to, say, Corvallis, to have to travel? The team has to travel all that way. No chance of going to watch them play as a local SU fan, but they don't have to play UConn.
Yeah, I'd say my last visit to stores, they were in the midst of winning 120. It was literally that was the year their winning streak ended with the Morgan Williams shot, but it was that was the last game they played at home with the winning streak, and it did not go very well for Syracuse that day. So
no.
things like that.
This is not the same UConn team, though. This is not.
No, it's not.
This is not the undefeated UConn number one seed, heavy favorite to win it all team. Even though, as you point out, they did not win it all that year, but it's not that team. This team goes about 5.5 players deep right now. So if you get them playing, the kids that do play are in great shape. But if you get them playing fast, or you get them in foul trouble, you get Aaliyah Edwards in foul trouble, then UConn could be gotten, because the margin for error for them, be it injury, further injury, or foul trouble, or fatigue, is very, very, very thin.
I'm still concerned about Kia Nurse hitting more for threes, and that game was 7 years ago. Like, it could happen. It could happen at any second here. How much, though, with stuff like that, Charlie, legitimately, when the NCAA puts together this bracket, does geography and travel come into it? Obviously, it is easier for the NCAA to get Syracuse to stores than it would be to Corvallis or even Bloomington, Indiana. Is not that far away, but it's easier to get them to stores than some of these other places.
It is taken into consideration. You try to minimize travel costs as best you can with some of this, but what comes first in that list of priorities is bracketing by the rules that are set forth. So you're not being placed with other conference teams where you would play them before. In the case of the ACC, there's going to be the possibility of some conference teams lined up where they could play in the Sweet 16, but no, you're not going to set up to do that any sooner. So they have to follow those rules, and then some other rules that don't directly affect Syracuse could actually affect where they get placed, where with other schools involved and keeping their conference affiliations away from each other. So, geography does play a role. You try to keep teams as close to home as possible. If they can take a bus as opposed to fly, and the 350 miles is the threshold, they're definitely going to try to do that if at all possible. But if it comes down to a flight to Bloomington or a flight to Corvallis, there's really, as far as the NCAA is concerned, there's really not a big difference there. They would try to make it so they could go close, but if teams are getting on a plane, they're getting on a plane. Yeah. So it's really more about, can you keep them off the runway and onto the highway? If you can do that, then they're going to try to do that as much as they can.
Yeah, just a recent historical precedent. I mean, going back to when Syracuse really started making tournaments in the current ish format, the Orange have only traveled to either SEC schools or to stores. So that's been the only list of places they have gone. So we'll see what happens coming up this year. I do want to ask you this, Charlie. I mean, looking at the bracket, these will not be the top 3 seeds on the S curve, but it's the top one. And I don't know if Iowa's your second-ranked team right now, but how do you expect the 3 teams I think people are going to be most interested where they land and their path to each other in the future are going to be South Carolina, Iowa, and LSU. Do you think they'll try to keep them apart so we can keep a Final Four alive, even though LSU isn't a 1, or how does that go with those 3 teams?
Well, we can't get South Carolina and LSU in the same region based on the rules. They're in the same conference. They can't be 1s and 2s. So just by that, they're going to be separated enough where the soonest they would meet would be in a national semifinal game. And Iowa as a 1 and LSU is a 2. Now it's very possible they could be placed in the same region and have to play each other in a regional final. Although, if and this gets really granular, so hang in there with me. If Stanford and USC are the number 1 seeds, as I have projected right now, and UCLA is a 2, UCLA can't go with Stanford or USC, so that limits them to either being placed with Iowa or South Carolina. And since if they go with South Carolina, then I suppose that then LSU could go with Iowa, but it's really a fine line there. So I guess what I'm saying is the likelihood of Iowa and LSU in the same region isn't that great if Stanford and USC are also number 1 seeds.
Gotcha. Yeah, there are a lot of those minute bracketing rules they got to follow, which often forces their hands to or away from some of these certain things. And last thought here, Charlie. I always enjoyed Selection Monday. Now that it's Selection Sunday, it's still great. It kind of gets lumped in. Why do you think it was the move away from that Monday? Is it just another day to plan travel, or what was the deal with going to Sunday instead of Monday?
Well, it is really that, Brian, because when they added the first 4, so they went to 68 teams in the women's field, which is they didn't have that until just a few years ago. They couldn't do selections on Monday night and then have teams playing on Wednesday. It just wasn't enough time. So they had to move selection Monday back to selection Sunday. And I was mixed about it too when they made the switch, but I don't mind it too much. It's got enough separation from the men's show. It's a couple hours different. It gives people a little bit of time to digest the men's, and then they can tune into the women's if they're interested in both. The exclusivity of the Monday was kind of cool, but it's not logistically, it's not possible anymore because they've got to play games. They've got to have games on Wednesday with the first 4, and it's just there's no turnaround time to have it. The team doesn't find out where they play until. And here's the other thing too: is you don't know you're in the first 4 until the bracket comes out. And in the case of the women's game, they don't play the first 4 at a dedicated place like Dayton, like the men do. They play it at the site of where the game feeds into. So it's really up in the air. You could get an idea, like, hey, maybe we should start looking into some travel arrangements for Dayton because we think we might be in the first 4. You can't even do that in the women. You'd be starting from scratch Monday at 8:00 Eastern, and that's just not enough time to get it done, so they had to move it back a day.
Yeah, and realistically, probably not enough time to actually prepare to host a game on that day, which may even be the biggest issue with that stuff. Whenever the show is, Charlie, I know we'll be watching. We'll be watching all you guys on Sunday night, waiting to see where and when and who Syracuse is going to play. Always great to chat. Thanks, Charlie, and we're going to be enjoying the tournament this year, so thanks for hopping on.
Oh, anytime, Brian. Always glad to join you. All
right. Always great to talk with Charlie Creme, ESPN's women's college basketball bracketologist. Charlie currently has the Orange as a 5 seed, but as you heard there, they are literally on the border of a 5 and a 6, so opens up a lot of possibilities of where the Orange could go and whom they might play coming up in this tournament. With that, we'll take a break. We'll get Jordan in here, a little 411 when we come back in this hour, brought to you by Laborers Local 633. We're back after this here at Q Sports Talk and ESPN Radio.